So my name is Cecilia Gonzalez, and I'm interviewing Rachel Ayala for the Voces Oral History Project in Brownsville, Texas.
Okay, it's Ayala.
Ayala. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Should I start again or?
You want to start again?
Yeah,
Because
they can
you
cut this part out.
mispronounced it.
Ayala.
Ayala.
Thank you. So my name is Cecilia Gonzalez, and I'm interviewing Rachel Ayala for the Voces Oral History Project in Brownsville, Texas. Today is Sunday, April 2nd. Thank you. Just to make sure you understand, the interview will be housed at the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection. If there is something you don't want to talk about, you don't have to. If there is something you want to talk about, please speak up. So just to start off, how was your experience growing up in Brownsville?
I was one of the fortunate ones that even though I lived in the southmost area, which is considered one of your low-income areas, I had fantastic teachers that made a long-lasting effect on myself as well as my classmates. In particular, I had a teacher by the name of Theodore Beimler. He was beyond his time. He came in from New York, and he talked about, and imagine, this is in the early 60s, about computers. He talked about the first man walking on the moon, and people thought he was crazy. He introduced us to Orson Welles, a lot of enrichment that we possibly could not have had as a result of him.
Were there any other people that influenced you in your early education?
In my early education, other than Mr. Beimler, I think the most important ones were my parents. That they always said that my dad, he said, "I'm not a rich man. The only thing I can give you is an education that no one can take away from you." And so as a result, when he would go downtown, he would say, we were three. He says, "I can only buy you a toy." And we wanted books because my mother, every afternoon, she would put us down for a nap and she would read to us. So we wanted books, nothing else. And I think that that in itself encouraged us to read. So I credit our success to my father and my mother.
If you had to put a word to Brownsville, what would it be, to describe it?
Brownsville has a lot of talent, and it will one day shine to the point that everybody will know that we're here.
So does that mean that not everyone knows that Brownsville is a city?
Unfortunately, because of the fact that we're on the border and there is so much negative publicity because of the fact that we're so close to Mexico, a lot of people do not want to come down here because they feel that perhaps it's dangerous, that perhaps it doesn't provide the best educational system, and that is not true. I'm a retired assistant superintendent. I devoted 45 years to the school district. My girls went to public school because I had to believe in the system that I work for. And now I have 3 daughters that are school principal, 2 that are in elementary and 1 in middle school.
What do you remember about your experiences as a child and teenager attending Brownsville schools?
Do you know that I'm going to tell you that when you don't know any better, everything is fantastic. I grew up at Cromac. It was the first year that it opened. It was that school was among cotton fields. It was exciting. Everything was new to us. Let me just share an experience with one of my teachers, and I still remember Ms. Conde in 4th grade. We didn't have lunch programs, so my dad used to go take us lunch or pick us up for lunch. And this was in 4th grade. He waited and waited, and we didn't come out. And so my dad went to the room and said, "Is there anything wrong?" She said, "Yes, I'm keeping them in for lunch, and they're not going to eat until they learn their multiplication tables." So my dad said, "Fine." He left. He didn't bring me lunch. He brought lunch to the teacher, and he said, "You keep her if she has to stay more." So that was the support that the teachers had from parents, because they knew how important it was for us to get an education.
Well, you already answered this question, but can you emphasize how your parents encouraged you to get an education?
When we graduated from high school, it wasn't a matter or you're going to go to college. It was a matter where are you going to be going to college, because it was so ingrained since we were little. I have my older sister, which was a role model for us. Elida Medina was a commander in the Navy. She went into the Navy when very few women went and were accepted. She, at one time, she was the second highest ranking Mexican American woman in the Navy. She was an anesthetist. She was in Vietnam. In fact, she was taking care of in the USS Repose, the ship, taking care of our wounded. My sister, toward the end of her life, had Alzheimer's, which is so sad because she was such an intelligent woman. And one day I came home and she was in front of the TV and she's crying. And I said, "Sis, what's the matter?" And this is when we had started our war in Iraq. And she says, "Sis, I've got to go take care of our wounded." And I said, "No, they're going to be fine." But it was so sad to see that. So she had a major part. I have a brother that was got his master's, attended Tulane University. And then my youngest sister got her master's from Texas Women University. So because of them, we are what we are.
Why did you decide to go into education?
Honestly, I originally was not going to education. I love psychology. In fact, most of my undergraduate work was in psychology. But understand, my parents were very humble. My brother at that time was attending Texas A&I University, and I was offered a job at 19. I had my associate in arts degree, and one of my former teachers approached me and wanted to teach. I said, "I don't have a degree." He says, "You can go into an alternative certification program," and my dad said, "It's up to you." So I went into teaching, and which I love. It was very difficult at the beginning, when you just go in. I started teaching at 19. So as you can see, I'm 4'10". Most of my kids were as tall or taller than I was. And I loved it, When my daughters, all of them were school principals, I told them, go, if you want to be a principal, it's because you want to, not because it's something that's there. We have too many teachers that are there and they're not for teaching kids.
What was it like teaching at such a young age?
It was very challenging because there was no limit. I had 45 to 50 kids in the classroom. There was no air condition. You had, I guess, I was smart enough to know that I would group my students, and so I could give them individual attention, and I work from group to group. And I had a fantastic mentor, Francisco Saldivar, that would tell me, a teacher, he says, "I'm going to only tell you one time, so you better learn." So I did. I was a fast learner.
Were you ever discriminated or treated differently for being so young?
No, and I tell you why. Because we're in such dire need of teachers that they were just hiring teachers that could go in. I was one of those. Imagine, I graduated at 17 from high school, 2 years. I got my associate in arts. It was just a matter of, I've always been a hard worker. I'm not afraid of, and I love kids. I don't have very much patience for adults, but for students I do. Because I've always told them, children are like diamonds in the rough, that all the hands that touch them polishes that diamond, that at the end of high school or college, they become that hope diamond and our future.
What can you tell me about the teaching shortage that you mentioned earlier?
That does not exist now because I'm a retired assistant superintendent, but back then, we were hiring just over the phone, from other teachers from out of state. There were just not enough teachers, and we just had too many students. And back then, we did not have bilingual education. And for the teachers that are listening to this, you did P duty, you did lunch duty, you did after school, and no extra pay. That was part of your contract.
How many students were there compared to teachers? You said that you taught like 40, but what about the other teachers?
We're all the same.
Oh,
I wasn't the exception. We were all the same, and now we have a lot of now we have a lot of schools. Now, when I was an elementary school principal, and I chuckle when I hear the enrollment. My enrollment was over 1,000. I had 1,200 students in elementary and almost that much in middle school.
what were the students like?
You know what? They were very eager to learn. Like I said, I made school fun. I never thought that school should be a drag. I remember I was young. I was 19. So I used to go outside and play baseball with the kids. I used to do whatever they did. You know, I was out there. I became, they respected me. But since I had such wonderful teachers and I enjoyed school, I made it that they enjoyed school too.
Did you think your students were at the level they needed to be?
Excuse me?
Did you think your students were at the level they needed to be?
You know what? I am one of those that consider that if a person under my direction fails, it's a reflection that I'm not doing my job. So therefore, I never failed a student because, do you know, and not because that in comparison, right now, in comparison, my kids that were the lowest were the highest in other classrooms because they're eager to learn. So, you know, I was there for my kids.
Going back to the teaching shortage, what specific challenges arose from not having enough teachers?
Well, the challenge was that if you were not prepared to put in long extra hour, imagine, we didn't have all the technology that you had. We had that ditto machine that you used to have to make copies. You didn't have any teacher aides or paraprofessional to help you. So you did everything yourself. You just had to, we experimented a lot, you know, we did the self-contained classrooms and we went ahead and departmentalized until what was successful. I was very, very apprehensive about when you departmentalize your kids because I wanted my kids. I wanted to be accountable to make sure that my kids got all the skills necessary.
What would you say is one significant memory from your first year of teaching? One significant memory from your first year of teaching.
Do you know that, believe it or not, I have never forgotten my students. I was at HEB and one of my students said, "Hi, Miss Ayala." And I said, "Edwin." He said, "You remember? Edwin Alanis, you were in my first year class." And he said, "Yes, ma'am, how can you remember?" I'll never forget my first class. I'll never forget because, you know, there were either your success or your failure, and I learned with them. We grew up together.
Do you remember how much you got paid?
Do you know how much I got paid under alternative certification program? $250 a month. That was my salary.
So, who or what influenced you to finish your education to go on to Texas A&I?
You know what? I was married to a wonderful husband, my husband Albert Ayala. I got married before I got a degree. And my father said, "I am going to let you marry her, but you promise me that you will make sure she finished." The principal that hired me was was an assistant principal when I was going to school, and he said, "I don't want you to get married because you're not going to get your degree." I said, "I promise you, sir, I will." My father died 6 months after I was married, and my husband came up to me and he said, "I promised your father you would finish. You're going back to school full time." So if it hadn't been for him, that he was a man of his word, I was going to Texas A&I University, and you know, and I was already married, and by then I had a little girl. My mother was taking care of my baby while I was up at school. So it was not a matter, do I want to? It's a matter, you are going to finish.
So, the principal told you that he didn't want you to get married because then you weren't going to finish your education. Was that common back then, or?
I don't, well, a lot of people under understand there was such a shortage here. There were a lot of people under alternative certification, and many of them did not finish. And when I finished, I went and I told my Mr. Science, George Science, here's my degree, sir. I promised you I was going to finish.
And what did you get your degree in?
I got my degree in education. I got it at Texas A&I University, and then I came back.
When did you realize there is a disparity in funds for schools on the border?
The reason there is not enough funds is that because we're getting a lot of a lot of students from Mexico, and they judge us based on having to test them, and the law has changed. We had to test them the first year they were here in English. You know they're not going to be successful. So a lot of your funding is based, of course, on your outcome, your accountability.
What was your role or participation in the South Texas Border Initiative?
As far as the initiative, you know, I'm very vocal, so I promote. And I was with the district for 45 years, so understand, I've educated most of Brownsville, or their parents or their grandparents.
In your opinion, what needed to be improved in the schools? What would fix the disparities?
What needs to be improved in the schools, and I can tell you right now, that many of our kids fall in the cracks, and many of them are being helped now. I remember there are a lot of special programs right now with children, you know, that have learning disabilities. Dyslexia is a great program. I was in charge of that program in the school district, and many of our school kids drop out of school because the teachers were not trained to identify. They were not trained to deal with the disabilities that they had by adjusting the curriculum in the classroom.
Did you believe the case was a just cause?
Yes, it is a just cause because, you know, many of our kids that drop out of school are very frustrated. Many of them wind up in our prison system. And if we were to help to those, you know, those kids, and you have to understand the laws has changed. A lot of schools under the American Disability Act are now protected under the law. And students can come back and sue their teachers for not having taught them.
So when did you realize your school or the border schools here in the Valley were lacking? What made you realize?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the success of our students. We have a lot of kids that are successful, don't get me wrong. But there, for example, let me tell you, as an assistant superintendent, I had the southwest area that's supposed to be your poverty schools. And it's not the kids. I had to fight for funding for my kids from my area because I come from the southwest area. The fact that I was humble didn't mean I wasn't intelligent. It didn't mean I couldn't do it. Most of my campuses, and I had 13 campuses, did very well, in spite of the fact. And like I said, there is a discrepancy as far as the funding with the different areas, and it's a shame because we're all of them are kids.
So when you went to Texas A&I, did you notice any differences?
Oh wow! Talk about Texas A&I. When I went A&I, it was very racist. You could tell half of the town was for the Hispanics, half of the town was for you know, that you weren't Hispanic. And just let me share with you, and I shared this with someone the other day. Before we Hispanics could take education classes, do you know what they did to us? On a Saturday morning, we all went to the auditorium, and you had to read a paragraph. And depending on how they liked how you read your paragraph, you had to take speech before you could take education. And it was only done to us.
Was that to get rid of your accent or the way you spoke?
Accent, if they were looking for accent, why is it that people that speak French and have accent is so cute? And why is it that the Hispanics do not? The fact that you may have an accent does not take away from your intelligence.
Was well, was Spanish speaking banned at your school?
Oh, when I was growing up in elementary, middle school, we were not allowed to speak Spanish. We would get punished if we spoke Spanish. We would either get fined a penny every time we spoke Spanish, or you would get a, what do you call, they would pinch you. And that's how you were, and they used to tell us, practice the language. And it used to be, and I don't think so in BISD anymore, that you can only speak Spanish in school. You had to speak English all the time. Only if it was being taught could you speak the Spanish language.
So when was Spanish being taught? Were the courses in high school for like language classes, or when did
Middle
that
school.
happen?
Middle
And
school
what
and
did
high
you
school.
think about that? Was it ironic to you?
Well, you know what? I was forced to speak the language because my dad spoke English, my mother did not. So when we got at home, she did not want us to speak English because she couldn't understand. But I was one of the lucky ones that my mom went ahead and go into night school and learned English. So like that, you know, she could go ahead and speak to us. Not that we didn't, but I'll tell you what, I'm very pro bilingual. I think Spanish is a very important language. My daughters did not speak English until they went to kinder, because I felt that they needed to learn the language and they needed to learn it correctly.
So by the time your daughters went to school, were they punished for speaking Spanish?
No, not at all. Not at all. What I would do is to tell them, hey, today, total Spanish, otherwise I'm not going to answer you. So they would be forced to, okay, Mom, okay. Or I would put some Spanish films that we would watch together. And then my mom spoke only Spanish, so they picked up the language correctly. My mom used to say, if you don't know how to speak it correctly, do not open your mouth. Okay?
Do you think anything good came from the only speaking English or what they were trying to promote in schools?
I don't think they did it to harm us. I think they did it for us to be successful and to be able to, you know, go ahead, understand all of your classes you take are in English, and you need to practice the language.
Going back to Texas A&I, can you go more in depth about your experience there?
I have always, you could tell which of the teachers were racist. I'm a good student, and I'm not, you know, and I'm an A student. I worked very hard in one of my classes, and I made a B because of that. And I remember I gave a presentation, and one of the teachers liked my presentations, said to come in to talk to her. And her remark to me, well, I'm surprised you don't have an accent. So what did you do? You couldn't, if you argued with him, what were you going to do? Fail the class.
Did you have any friends that also experienced discrimination?
I don't. Yes, we all did. Those that went to A&I, and understand, not everybody's outspoken like me.
How do you think the lawsuit, the South Texas Border Initiative, influenced public education or higher education in the Valley?
You know, they're doing it because they feel there's a need. But I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. We need to go on it in a positive way, that it's going to, that people are not going to resent the fact that you're forcing them to do anything. And that I think everything is just the approach. When I started school, there was no, you did not need to, you were not, they did not have bilingual certification. I mean, you did not have to be a bilingual teacher to be able to teach. You just need to be Spanish. And then the law nickel law came into effect that we needed to teach bilingual education. It wasn't so much that we needed to, we were trained. I couldn't, I was already in administration, so I went through training. But it was just the approach that you took because it was for the betterment of our students. Sometimes I think they were too rigid in terms of how much Spanish you spoke during the day, how much English. I think it's an individual thing according to the student.
Can you go more in depth about the law nickel?
Oh, the law nickels was a fact, and that some parents were suing the school district, and I remember it was San Antonio, because they had come in, I think, maybe in from another country, and the kids could not understand. And back then, you only taught, you learned English by immersion. In other words, there was no Spanish taught. It was immersion. You got, like, you sink or swim. And that's when it said that it was discriminatory, that we needed to have bilingual education in terms of some Spanish and some English for the kids.
Do you think the lawsuit influenced public education or higher education in the Valley? I'm sorry, did you see any changes before or after the case?
Personally, I don't see any, but then I have always promoted myself, okay? Like I said, I've always felt that if a person failed, it was that I was not doing my job. Well, perhaps maybe this was an eye-opener for some people, that perhaps they were not doing the maximum to improve what is there and make it better.
Going back to bilingualism, what advice would you give to future students on speaking two languages?
I think speaking two languages are very, very important. I mean, we are in a society that we traveled, and let me give you a perfect example. My parents promoted Spanish, and of course English too. My brother majored in the Army, and he went to Tulane University. He graduated, he was an accountant. And let me tell you why he was successful. Because of the Spanish, he was always traveling internationally. So he was the one that was being sent to your Latin American countries, and how important, it was for him. Since he was in the service, he also learned German. So he was very lucky that he was, of course, we used to get very upset with him because he was one of those that could just read things one time and he learned while the rest of us had to study.
In your opinion, what changes still need to be made that the case did not improve for funding and higher education?
I don't know why, when it comes to education, which is your main focus, that we have to fight for any sort of funding. The kids are our future. They have money for so many other things, that there are so many things that have yet to be improved. And yet again, I want to harp on the fact that we're neglecting our kids with special needs. And I don't mean kids that are severely mentally handicapped, but I'm talking about everybody in general, that has some sort of learning disability that needs some help. It's not being focused there. We still haven't, our teachers still need a lot of training, modifications in the classroom. Honestly, I'm for technology, but I think technology, I was quoting, in fact, something that Einstein said, and this is Einstein. Technology has created a world of idiots where there's no communication. So that's what I think. We need to start communicating. We need to start speaking.
Were you in the classroom when technology was introduced, or Were you already retired by then?
No, understand. Yes. Oh, wow. When I was working on my master's at Pan American University, you didn't. I used to have to travel over there to use computers. Computers were not that accessible, and it was very frustrating. And now, that's it's all there. In my position as assistant superintendent, my job, I had 13 campuses, was to deal with problems. So I left the technology to my administrative assistant. I didn't have the time to be, I very honestly dealing with that.
So after you received your degree from Texas A&I, you came back to Brownsville
Yes.
to teach. And you came back to the same school?
I was in the classroom as a teacher only 8 years. Yes, I did come back to the same school, to Victoria Heights. Then I taught for 1 year at Russell Elementary. After being there as a teacher for 2.5 years, I became the principal. I was the 5th female principal in the district in a male-dominated profession.
So in an interview with the Brownsville Herald, when you told them that when you were appointed assistant principal at Russell Elementary, like you mentioned, you said that you wanted to resign after 2 weeks.
Do you know why I wanted to resign? It's true. It was because there was no training. It was everything was so secretive. You didn't know anything. I was an assistant principal. I was good at what I did, but administrative wise, you weren't trained. It was like the way I got my job was that I was not going to apply for the position, and my principal insisted. I turned my application in 10 minutes before the deadline, and when the board meeting took place, I get a call from my superintendent, Mr. Vistedo, and Mr. Vistedo said, "Rachel, do you want to know who the new principal is at Russell Elementary?" I said, "Sir, whomever you put there for me, don't you worry." I said, "I'm going to help him. You're the principal." Okay? So the way I took over, the former principal cleaned out the office at night, and I was in charge the next day. So it was no training, hey, I want to prepare you for this. I used to stay in the office till 12 o'clock going over reports and things that needed to be done. The next day after the board meeting, it was the end of the 6 weeks. All the parents, you have a new principal, and I had one of those very demanding, very high profile campuses. So it was like, wow. And so I went to Mr. Vistedo and I said, "Sir, I don't think this is for me." And I said, "Here's my letter of resignation." And you know what he did? He got it and he tore it up. He says, "I did not hire quitters. You go back and you do what I put you there for." And 45 years later, I was still there.
Why do you think there wasn't any training for you?
There wasn't any training. You do not realize there was no training for principals. It was just, I can tell you what, it was not a, what do you call it? It was more administrative than concentrated on curriculum, okay? That's the way it was. It wasn't because my principal failed to do it. It was because that was a mode at that time. We have come a long way since I became a principal. I am not the principal that I was when I started as to when I finished.
Did you feel any discrimination because you were a woman working in administrative?
Discrimination is far, I tell you, I have 3 daughters that are school principals. And sometimes they say, "Mom, you come on very strong sometimes." I said, "You know what, you need to understand that I was a 5th female principal in the district in a male-dominated profession, that if I was not assertive, they would have eaten me up." I said, "So let me know when I am, because it's a natural thing for me, a natural reaction if I was to survive, in that profession." I don't think they did it intentionally. I think that was just the mode at that time.
So when would you say more women were getting into the profession of administrative work?
Well, I can tell you right now that if you look at BISD, there are a lot of females. The majority are females and males. All of our principals right now in high school, they're all females. And that's a tough job in high school.
What do you think of the principal that pushed you to stay? The one that tore up your
Oh, Mr.
resignation?
Vestedo, he was fantastic. My patron, I love him till the end, and he was very supportive. And I am what I am because of him, because he believed in me, and I was not going to let him down. When my husband died, I was staying home, and he was no longer superintendent. He went to my house and he said, "Rachel, you go back to work. Your husband would have never wanted you to stay home." So because of him, I just, okay, let's go back again. And he was a superintendent for BISD for 13 years.
So after you were the assistant principal at that school, where did you end up next?
I was an assistant principal there, and I became a principal at Russell. Then I was reassigned to Stell Middle School because I had a very successful campus at Russell. I was transferred to Stell because the passing rate, state-based passing rate, was 17%, and the state was getting ready to take it over. So they took me over there to go straighten out the school. So I believe a lot in working with your teachers. You don't go there, you have to have ownership. I just work with them, and we work with our kids. We got the discipline under control, and the campus was off probation that first year.
So did you fix any other schools?
When you say that was a challenge, but I loved it. I was there 8 years. Then I was chosen. Then I had another person that believed in me. It was Mr. Hector Gonzalez, and that's when I became assistant superintendent. And I had one of the largest clusters. I was in charge. At the beginning, we're in clusters. I had Hannah High School, then I was at Lopez High School, then I was in Porter. I was in charge of Porter High School. I had 2 middle schools, and I had 10 elementaries. And like I said, those were from supposedly not your successful campuses. I took it over. I need to give credit to the person that I took it from, Berta Peña. She started, working very hard with the campuses, and she was successful. I took it over, and I don't know if you're aware with the Broad Award. The Broad Award is something like the Nobel Peace Prize, and Brownsville got the Broad Award, and it was because everybody was working very united. Everybody was working together.
You mentioned something and I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. You mentioned Porter. What did you mention before Porter? So by that time when you were the assistant superintendent, was there still not a lot of women in the field?
Yes, there was. By then, it's a lot different. But did the male-dominated cultures change? No. No. Why do you think I'm assertive? Why do you think I'm so outspoken? Because of that. Like I said, I love kids, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to give them the best education possible. Not that you just had to fight. You just had to be assertive to be able to get many times what you needed. And in a good way, because I'll tell you what, especially Mr. Hector Gonzalez, we used to have our cabinet meetings, and our saying was, we agree to disagree. We may not always agree, but we came out there having spoken our piece, and we had to work together to have a successful school district.
Do you have any specific memories of the male dominance that you mentioned?
I think one in particular, and I always tell them that we're at a cabinet meeting, and there was a gentleman that was very rude to the women, and we were going round table, round robin, and he in particular was very rude to the other assistant superintendent. And when he came to me, I asked him a question, and he did the same to me. I said, "Who do you think you are to speak to me that way? You will respect me, and you will not treat the females like that, because I don't have to tolerate it. We're all equal here. There's no difference." That was the only time I had to say it. It stopped.
So, some people say that you and Joseph Molina are among the pioneers of chess in Brownsville elementary schools. How did chess come about in Brownsville?
I started the chess program in Russell. Everybody takes credit for it, which is okay. My purpose was not for recognition. Let me tell you the way chess started here in Brownsville, because we're well known throughout the state. We have internationals. I was the type of principal, I never sat behind the desk. I had a wonderful professor, George Thompson, that used to say, "You do paperwork after hours. You're out there in the campus." So I was walking in the morning. First thing in the morning, I would go check the cafeteria to make sure that the kids were getting, they were getting their breakfast. And then I was walking in one of the classrooms, and I always had my challenging students that would always get into, problems. And they were in this particular classroom with Mr. Waddell, and they were on the floor and were all over. And then I noticed them, and this particular kids had just gotten into problems and ran into the room. So I asked Mr. Waddell, I said, do you mind going to see me during your off period? So here's that thing, I'm probably in trouble because I have the kids in here. So I said, "Tell me about the kids." I said, "I saw some on the floor." He said, "Oh yeah, they were playing chess." I said, "I want you to do me a favor." And he said, "What?" I said, will you teach his kids how to play chess?" Because I wanted to channel their energy to something constructive and not to be getting into trouble and being in the office all the time. And he said, "Well, we don't have any money. I need to buy chess boards. I need to do this." I said, "I didn't ask you." I said, "By the end of the day, bring me a list of what we need." And at the end of the day, he said, "Here's the list, Miss Ayala, but we don't have any money." I said, "Here's my credit card. You go get the kids what they need. You get whatever they need, because this is about kids." So that's how we got started. And then I had some fantastic parents that I approached, and I said, "Look, we need to work with me." And I had one in particular, Gay Greenspan. She went out to the community. The first time we went to a program or to a tournament, we were embarrassed. Everybody was in uniform. Here we were, all mixed matched, and we had to raise the money to be able to send the kids. But you know what? We worked very hard. They became very successful. Then it started spreading throughout the district. Then I had a very supportive parent that went to the school board and fought for our kids. And now in Brownsville, every school is giving money for a chess coach, and they're giving money to be able to travel to the tournaments, not to have. In other words, what we wanted was equity for every campus to have access to this. As a result, I got to meet they did a movie, Endgame, I don't know, on chess, how it more or less started here in Brownsville, but almost, what's his name? The one that did the movie, what was it? Almost. The one about the math, the teacher that was very good with math.
Stand and Deliver.
Stand and Deliver, but what was his name? Anyway, he came down to Brownsville and I met him. And it was great. He says, "This is something great. You got started here." And I just met the young man that did the one for Endgame. He's the one that comes out in Modern Family. Uh, and that one, he said, "Wow, it's so nice to meet you. Do you know that you're an icon? You started something that just spread." And I can tell you, everybody has taken credit for it. And and my purpose was not for the credit. When I was there at the movies, seeing how many kids have been impacted, it was such an awesome feeling that I had a part in that. Doesn't matter who started, it's the fact that you help kids.
So, who is Joseph Molina?
Joseph Molina is Mr. Waddell's son. JJ, no. Joseph Molina was was one of my students at Russell.
So, was chess only in the elementary schools, or?
It has gone all the way from, it started with elementaries, now middle school and high school, now our universities. Do you know that we had a student from, I believe it was Egley International. He had competed in an international tournament. It's something very big here in Brownsville.
Why do you think that it continues to be a success?
It continues to be a success because, it develops their critical thinking skills. It helps improve their scores. And the challenge, my granddaughter is playing chess. And, or I see my two granddaughters. And it's just something that is so challenging. I don't know, the tournaments that we have here are tremendous. There's so much participation.
So, how did you start building funding for chess?
At the beginning, it was just through fundraisers. And that's when the inequity occurred, that some of the campuses in your not socioeconomic schools could not afford it to be able to have the monies. And that's when they tried to get the equity by having the fundings on all the campuses. And it hadn't been for that parent. Now you have a lot of school board members who really backed up this program.
What was the biggest accomplishment from the chess?
Well, the biggest accomplishment you can say is the fact that it developed into a both state, national, international. Throughout the state, Brownsville is known as the capital of chess, and the fact that it impacted so many students.
Going back to your administrative work, you said that you were in charge of Porter High School.
Yes.
How long were you in charge of Porter High School?
I think I was there 8 years.
And what accomplishments did you make there?
Well, understand, I was just the guidance because I had many principals under me. But one of the principals that really made a lot of change in that campus was Mr. Hector Chirinos, and he was my assistant principal in elementary when I started. And that's when it started becoming a recognized campus. Because he is also from the Southwest area, and we worked very hard with our kids. We became soccer state champions. All of a sudden, everything went up. Everything went up. The recognition, the hard work. So now Porter is known as the Porter Nation. We're the Cowboys.
You mentioned soccer. Was that always a big sport?
It has been a sport, but not as successful as it has been in the past, because now you have Porter that got a state championship, Lopez got a state championship, Rivera got a state championship.
And what do you think? Why do you think that is?
Because I think that it's not all about football. There are other sports that kids can succeed.
Do you think it was because of more funding, or?
It was never the funding. The issue was never the funding. It was the emphasis on the sports. That every sport is important.
So earlier you mentioned that you love kids, and why do you think that is?
That what?
That you love kids.
I love kids because they keep you young. They keep you young. I see. Let me give you an instant when I was a teacher at Russell Elementary. I divided my classes in groups, and you see, we were not given this training, and I just did because I could devote myself to the kids that needed the most, or the ones that I could accelerate the instruction, or the ones that I didn't. So I had this young lady that was very frustrated, and she couldn't work. I think it was a division problem. So I went and sat on a one-to-one with her, and I said, okay, let me show you. And all of a sudden, her eyes just opened. And she said, Miss Ayala, it's so easy. I said, well, why haven't you ever been able to do it? Do you know what her answer was? Nobody ever sat to teach me, Miss Ayala. And this is in 6th grade. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? It was so sad. So it's just that, you know, they're eager. In my campuses, and I run into a lot of students, I have a lot of activities for them. You know, we used to have rallies and everything. My punishment for my kids was that they would get deprived of attending the activities. So they hated that because they knew we were going to have, every Friday morning, we would have our rallies in the gym. Let me tell you something that I did, because, you know, like when you're going to have spring break or we have a holiday, you have a lot of kids that are absent. Well, I have a courtyard. I would get a DJ. I would put up food stands, and we, at noon, they would go out. They didn't want to be absent. They wanted to be there. And I love music. I would have wapango contests, and, you know, we would be out there. The teachers would be out there. It was fun going to school.
So where did you get inspired to have all this creative assignments? Or
I'm full of life. I've never been, let me tell you, a perfect example. My daughters have to work during the summer, and I was taking care of my 3 young granddaughters. And so I hate the TV. I hate this technology. My grandkids are not allowed when they go to my house. They go see me. They don't go do this, and I tell my daughters to leave them outside. Well, and so I said, okay. So what I did, I took my 3 granddaughters. We went to Walmart. They chose the material. I taught all of them how to straight stitch. They made their pillows. Then then I made it fun. I got a floral material and got buttons, and they put buttons in the center so they know how to put buttons. We had field trips. We went to the courthouse. Then I got a podium, and I said, okay, select a topic. I want you to learn how to speak in front of it. And we did that. And the other thing is we play a lot of Scrabble. And then a word game. And one of them came out, and I said, well, what's the word game? Okay. They come out with a word. They tell me what the definition, and they have to use in a sentence. So my 8-year-old comes out with, abuelita, we haven't played the word game today. I said, okay, what's your word game? Egocentric. I said, very good, but what does egocentric mean? It means that you're very self-centered. And I said, okay, go ahead and use it in a sentence. And she did. Then my 5-year-old, abuelita, I have a sentence too. I said, you do? What is a sentence with egocentric? My father is very egocentric. He only wants to do what he wants to. And you see, it's fun, and we're learning. And when I was teaching in the classroom, I used to teach math, remedial math. So you know how I taught multiplication tables? Throwing dice. We would throw the dice, and then they would add 2 dice and then multiply them. And so that would be on Friday. So I taught them through fun. It's not a drag. It was fun.
what are some other creative or fun assignments that you had besides the rolling dice?
As far as teaching, I mean, I will do anything different I will do anything different that, okay, like for example, for some of my kids, I would go, we will always have a teacher's, you behave, you're going to be able to go to this activity. A teacher-student game outside. I would just think of things that would just be motivational. I invite my parents to go in to help us. I was at, perfect example, middle school. Middle school is a challenge. You know how the kids go not dressed properly? And a lot of them, didn't want to go. It's okay, they want to be sent home. No, that's not going to work. Okay, and so what I did was that my parents I bought sweats, so they were dressing appropriately. They would put the sweats, we would keep their clothes at the end of the day, and then my parents would wash the clothes, so we would have them ready for them. It wasn't, it's not, I'm going to punish you. Okay, just a reminder, this is how you need to dress, and here it is.
So you just said that middle school was challenging. Can you go more into detail about that?
Yes. Well, when I went into that middle school, discipline was totally out of control. And my assistant principal, Mr. Chinos, helped me a lot to straighten it out. And I was very fair. I've never, I used to have my kids, because what happens, they rezone, and you had two different neighborhoods that were fighting. And and the kids would say, Miss Ayala, we don't mind because you're very fair. It's not us, it's both. Hey, let's go ahead and talk. I had so I never had any problems with them. One of the things that they told me, Miss Ayala, you don't bring your car at the end of the year because it's going to get scratched. And I said, no, I don't. And the kid said, don't worry, it's not your car, because of the fact that they would retaliate to those teachers that were not nice. I always told my secretary, if a student comes to my office, you interrupt me, because it takes a lot of courage for a student to come see me. One time, I remember, a student walked out of his class and went straight to my office. And I said, what's going on? Miss Ayala, please, no more. I can't be in that class anymore. The teacher was just really, So I said, okay. I said, not a problem. So then I had a talk with my teacher, and the problem is that you teach according to the child's individual needs, not the way you want to teach. You're there for kids. You're not there. And honestly, if you're not there for kids, then you're in the wrong profession. Then
You mentioned earlier that about teaching, that some teachers aren't really there for teaching. What would you say are other reasons they're there?
a lot of the times they need the motivation necessary to spark them again, not more of the same. A lot of the times, perhaps, that wasn't the profession that they wanted to go into. But that was my job to get that motivation, because I told you, in the 45 years that I worked, I never terminated anybody, because my philosophy was that if they failed, I failed to do my job.
So what influenced your decision to retire in 2011?
I knew that I was close to retirement. I did not know when I was going to retire, and honestly, it was going back and forth. And on my husband's anniversary that he passed away, August the 18th, I just woke up real clear-headed and said, today's the day. I just got up, went to central office, turned in my letter of retirement, and called my daughters. I have retired. Mom and I have not regretted. I enjoy life. I enjoy doing all the things that I never did. I enjoy my grandkids. I told my daughters I didn't retire to babysit, but I do help them, when they take them to class, do this. I like to go out to coffee with my friends. Let's go to the movies. And as a result of my sister being a commander, I traveled all over the world. So I don't want to travel. I have a beautiful garden. That's what I like. And I love my grandkids. They said that the most beautiful jewelry is your grandkids around your neck, arms. That's the most beautiful jewelry you can have.
You said that you got to do things that you didn't do before. What were those things?
Well, you know what? When I had to work, I couldn't go see my daughter's assemblies. So I now that they have to work, I will go for them. I get to enjoy my friends. Many of my friends, I'm turning 70 in May, and honestly, we're on borrowed time. And we're very fortunate to be here. So I love life, I enjoy life, and I'm going to live it to the fullest. I tell my daughters, if I am ever to get a terminal illness, I will not let you know, because I am not going to die before I'm dead. I want to enjoy it to the fullest. Perfect example. I'll buy something and my daughters will say, Mom, and I really don't. I mean, I have everything I need. And I said, Mijita, I'm not going to take the U-Haul with me to the cemetery, so let me enjoy it. And anyway, it's going to be yours. So that's it. Don't you think? I love life.
How do you think your role as an educator influenced your children? You mentioned that they're principals, but
Yeah, my daughters are principals. My grandkids are doing very well. My granddaughter is going to be taking a excellent the SAT test. She's going to be taking a 2-week course at Stanford this summer for law. My grandson, very successful in basketball, and it's the secret to it. And what I tell my daughters, don't feel guilty. It's not the quantity, but the quality of time that you spent with kids. In my house, I still have the same breakfast table. Spend hours as a family talking. No phones, no cell phones, nor anything. You know, I'm a very strict disciplinarian. Let me just give you an example with my 5-year-old. Oh, now she's 8 now. But when she was 5, taking her dancing lessons, that day she was just not listening. And so I even the dance teacher even called her attention to it. And so when I got home with her, I even raised my voice at her, which I don't, because she was really just acting up and it was unusual. So when my daughter came home, I said, Mijita, Risa has not been, behaving today. And her thing was, go give Abuelita a kiss and tell her you're sorry. So my granddaughter comes over here, and I said, excuse me, what are the rules in my house? I said, how many times do I tell you? 1 time. What happens if I have to tell you 2 times? I get a timeout. What happens if I have to tell you 3 times? I don't come back to your house until I learn manners. Yes, ma'am, that's exactly. You're not coming back to my house until you learn some manners. My daughter wanted to kill me with her eyes. She went out crying. She went. I was dying. A whole week I didn't see her. Then she calls and said, Abuelita, I'm ready to behave. I haven't had any problems with her anymore. On this technology, like I said, I'm a widow. My 2 granddaughters now, one is 13, the other one is now 8. They just want to be on the phone. I said, put away those phones. So I had dinner ready, and I tell the older one, dinner's ready, come. And she comes, and she's with a long face. And I said, Mijita? And she says, yes, Abuelita. I said, who do you talk to at home? My mommy, my daddy, and my sister. Who does Abuelita talk to? Nobody. My grandpa died. I said, that's right. Who do you eat with at home? My mommy and my daddy and my sister. Who does Abuelita eat with? She eats by herself every day. And all she had to say, I understand, Abuelita. It will not happen again. But I don't yell at them. I talk to them. And that's what I mean by communication. The problem in this day and age, parents are so busy, they'll tell a child, put that away. Doesn't listen, put that away. Put that away. Then when they're not in the mood, you condition your kids that you're going to tell them several times. And sometimes our parents not in the mood, they tell them the first time, and what do? They explode and they start yelling at the kids. And it's their fault because they have trained the kids like that. Am I correct? Old-fashioned.
So you talked about your experiences with your grandchildren and disciplining them, but can you go more in detail with your own children, your own daughters?
Yes, my own daughters, it was the same way. When I used to work, and back then we didn't have secretaries or anything, but I used to work during the summer. And my husband would call me, they don't want to listen and all this. I did exactly what we did at school. I went and drew a map of of the house. They were assigned their rooms. They were assigned which art needed to be done. So there was no question. Everybody knew exactly what had to be done. And the other day, I know I was talking to my daughter, and my granddaughter slept late, and she says, well, when we were little, my mother did not let us sleep late. We had to get up early and everything. During spring break, I said, remember, I had to take advantage of the time that I had because I'm the one that stayed behind. Everybody went. I had to take care of my mother. My father died from cancer. My sister died from cancer and Alzheimer's. My mother from cancer. So my husband was diabetic. He was a double amputee and had open heart. So I had to balance my time. I have a lot of energy, very hyper. So while they were asleep, I was washing clothes. I was doing my work. So they became very disciplined because when I went to work, and like I said, one of them would answer the phone, one of them would help me deliver textbooks, one of them would help do supplies. So they grew in that atmosphere, and they're very successful as principals, and because I hear it from their teachers. I hear it. But the one emphasis I need to give you, family comes first. Family comes first before anything. Nothing compensates for failure in the home. I turned down a superintendency job because I have my superintendency position because at that time my husband was sick, my sister had cancer, and my husband told me, are you going to regret that you turned down the position? And and my response to that is exactly that. Titles and money mean nothing if I was going to fail as a wife and as a mother. The fact that I was asked was honor enough, and I know that I could have done it.
Can you talk about how you aided in your daughter's education?
You know what? They have always been good students. I've never had any problems with them. One of my daughters, I remember my husband hit the roof because she came home and says, I'm not going to go to college. And my husband, why do you mean you're not going to go to college? And I said, let me handle it. So I said, Mijita, you know what? You do not have to go to college if you don't want to. But I'll tell you what, mi cielo, effective tomorrow, you go get a job and you start paying rent and you start paying food because I'm not going to support you just to be here in the house. She's one of my principals. She's a principal now.
Why do you think they all ended up being principals?
I don't know, because they're good at what they do, and they love kids too. The kids love them. Like my daughter, one of them has a campus that really is low income. She went out and to the community and got coats for all her kids for winter. Okay, I know the one that another one in the elementary went out and bought 36 coats for her kids. And I think my husband and I set the example. And so they see that it's not just a job, like I told you. It's not just a job. It's about kids.
Do you think that's a problem with education today?
I think that one of the things, and I'll be very honest, is the lack of parent support. I used to tell my parents that I was a strict disciplinarian because I cared, because it would have been easier for me to ignore the behavior because they were not mine. I'm going to give you an example, and I know, let me give you an example. In middle school, I had this young man that was misbehaving, and we kept calling the parent. And the parent was, I am not going to pick him up. Quit bothering me at my place of work. And my response to her was, ma'am, my teachers are not babysitters, and your child is interrupting the instructional program for the other kids. And I said, so you need to come for your child. I am not going. Well, when you're young, you don't know any better. I put him in my car, took the child to the place of work, and I said, here is your child. Why did you bring him? He's bothering me at a place of work. Well, what do you think your child is doing? Bothering me, my teachers, and me in my place of work. When your child is ready to behave, I'll be more than glad to take him. Guess what? I never had trouble with that child again.
Is there one specific student that you remember in your 45 years?
You know what? The saddest, I remember him, and my student, and you want to help all of your kids. I tell you, and I was in middle school, and the kids liked me. I was strict, but they liked me. I had one, years later, they came to see me, and I said, hey, come on in. And he went into my office, all full of tattoos and everything. And I said, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing fine. I said, let's be honest. You were on drugs, right? And he said, yes, ma'am. I said, and you're on drugs now? And he said, yes. And I said, what are you on? He said, coke. I said, really? I said, how much does it take to maintain the habit? He said, $500. I said, $500 a month? He said, no, Miss Ayala, $500 a day. I said, well, how can you support the habit? And he says, I steal cars. And I said, well, how much do you get paid for a car? $500. So that means he had to steal a car a day. And I had just gotten my car. It was a Lincoln Continental. I said, don't you dare steal my car. And he said, no, Miss Ayala, and besides, those new cars have chips, and we haven't learned how to steal those yet. I said, okay. So, we had a nice visit and all that stuff. And I always used to tell my kids, especially in middle school and high school, that by doing drugs, I said, you don't need other countries to come kill you. They're doing it by sending the drugs to the country. I said, I am tired of going to my students' funerals. I said, you need to stop this. Well, my student winded up dead a month later. So that is something that I was not able to reach him.
Thank you for sharing that. Would you say, you said that you went to your students' funerals, and were most of them from middle school or high school?
The which ones?
Most of the funerals, were they from your middle school students
Both.
or high school?
Both, middle school and high school.
And were they all drug related?
Yes, yes. In fact, you know that I told you I don't forget my students. I was reading the newspaper and I saw the boy's name. I said, this has to be my student that I had in elementary. So I went ahead and called the funeral home, and I called the parents. I said, let me talk to the sisters, and they said, yes, Miss Ayala, and it was him. And I said, and he said, you know what, Miss Ayala, he never forgot you. He never forgot you. So I dropped what I was doing. I left the office and I went to the funeral home. And they were telling me, how he had really gotten, and this was from my elementary student, he had gotten into drugs. And I went and spoke. And I reminded him of what he was when he was with me. That was not him. Then we was a very lovable child, and you remember his smile and all that. And because, like I said, to me it was not a job. To me it was about kids.
Why do you think that happens? Why do kids get involved with drugs?
They get involved with drugs a lot of times because it's true when they say, dime con quién andas y yo te diré quién eres. Tell me who you hang out with and I'll know who you are. A lot of the times it's just a peer pressure. A lot of the times, like I tell you, some of these kids that fall through the crack, that don't get the attention that they want, the ones that can't read. There are a lot of factors, and the thing is the parent involvement. They have to be there for the kids. They can't just assume that they're not. I never allowed my daughters to spend the night at anybody else's house. They could invite whomever they wanted to mine, and but I wasn't about to do that. I never had any babysitters other than my mother-in-law and my mother. And to this day, my granddaughters either stay with me or stay with the other grandmother. And that's a lot to it. You don't have to be rich. You know what one student told me in elementary? They said, Miss Ayala, my parents give me everything that I want except love and attention. And this is in elementary. Then I had another student, I'll never forget him. He was so cute. He was always in my office, and it was in elementary. And he said, Miss Ayala, I said, are you in the office again? Yes, ma'am. And I said, why, Danny? Why are you in my office again? The devil makes me do it, Miss Ayala. The devil makes me do it. And I said, well, Danny, you better talk to that devil because you're the one in my office, on him. And so he said, okay. So, and I just ran into one of my students that's a car salesman. His grandfather came in, and I still have him. I don't know why I saved him. And he gave me 2 belts because he was guardian for his grandkids. He said, Miss Ayala, because you could spank before it. Don't hesitate you just use them and you let me know. And they're still wrapped up there with a father's little note. I told him I was going to take it over to his place in Brooklyn. Never used it.
In your own words, what would you say, or what is the definition of a teacher?
A teacher is the one that makes a difference in a child's life for the positive way. That's the difference. A child that will always feel good about themselves. You don't demean students. You make them feel good. You make them successful. You give them that one-to-one. I'll tell you what, I have, my daughters, the ones that are elementary school teachers, and even the one that's in middle school, when they dress up, for different activities, like for Dr. Sue, and they dressed up, and do everything that they need to, and because they feel, the kids feel good about them. There's one of my daughters is really very conscious about the way she dressed, and he went and told the father, I want to dress like her when I grow up. And he says, hey, you're getting expensive for me. You better quit dressing up the way you do. And the kids notice. The kids notice what you do or don't do. Remember, as an assistant superintendent, very early I went to visit one of the campuses, and there was a substitute waiting to go in. And I said, excuse me, may I help you? Yes, I'm a substitute, with his real tight jeans, very low cut blouse. And imagine, this is middle school. I said, you know what? You need to go home and change. I said, I will cover the classroom until you come back. I said, because like I told my teachers, you set the example. How can you want me to get after a student for being late to class when you're late in the mornings? How can you, if my teachers came to school in jeans, I sent them home because they needed to set the example. How can I enforce a dress code if the teachers don't set the example? And I used to wear real high heels. I said, the day you see me dressed down, that's the day you dress down too.
What do you think about the future of higher education in the Rio Grande Valley, or education in general?
I think that with everything like this medical school that's coming down to Brownsville and all that, we're going to be up there. We just need to continue promoting it. Unfortunately, our system right here in Brownsville, they're revamping their educational system. When I was a principal at Russell, I remember that there was an initiative by the community and that federal funds were given that if we raised $1 million, the government would back it up, and that interest that would be generated for all those kids that took your accelerated courses, they would go ahead and earn money towards your tuition when they went to high school. Now you kids have the advantage, I don't know about you, all of the high schools in Brownsville are early college high schools that the kids are earning college credit. That was not the case when I got my degree very early. It was just that I accelerated myself.
When did that start?
Brownsville has had it for, let me see, at least 6 years.
So that was already present when you were helping out with Porter, correct?
Who?
When you were like the assistant superintendent with Porter?
Mhm. I promoted it because Porter was one of your last high schools to be, um, and you know, my daughters went to public schools. They didn't go to private schools because I have to believe in what I work for, in the educational system that I work for. So they did very well. Perfect example. My grandsons are zoned for the area where they live, but yet they're going to Porter. It's not where you go, it's what you make of yourself. Doesn't matter because I live on this side of town or that side of town. I'm not intelligent. No, that is not true.
We're kind of switching the subject, but what do you think about the merge of UTB and UTPA?
That is what I was alluding to. There's a lot of, in fact, Dr. Guevara, that was one of the interviews, that's what he's talking about. There's still a lot of, it's not running as smooth as it should. There's still need to get their act together for the betterment of the students because I see that some kids lost credit, some kids, they're doing away with programs, and ultimately the ones that are hurting are the kids. And it's something that needs to be done now.
Would you say the kids that are hurting are the ones from this side of the valley or from that side in Edinburgh?
Right now, the ones that are hurting are the ones here locally in Brownsville.
And why would you say that?
Because of the fact that, you see, in our case, they did away with Texas Southmost College. So this is a problem that they're having right now. A lot of kids lost credit. You don't have that problem over there. That, you know, that you closed a junior or not, you know, yeah, a 2-year college to merge with the others. So there is some growing pains right now. But like anything, there are always growing pains. The adults just need to be adults and start talking and communicating so we can get this straightened out.
Is that why you said that you like working with children rather than adults?
You know what? I work with adults very, very well. I just have very little patience for those that do not react. And, you know, because I want to be honest, more of the same that does not work needs to be changed. Just because we did it like this 20 years ago, or we're going to continue. We're going to continue with successful. And yes, I am, you know, I'm very honest and I tell it like it is.
Looking back, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment as an educator?
I think my biggest accomplishment is the fact that I touch many lives. I touch many kids. It is so nice that I'm out in the community now that I have time. Miss Ayala, you were my teacher. Miss Ayala, Miss Ayala. And I said, and you disciplined me. I said, but did I straighten you out? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, you did. So that is my accomplishment, the success of my students. That. And you know what? My mother always taught us that when you do something good, you do it because you want to, not because you have to. And when you have to throw your titles, like for example, I'm an assistant superintendent. I really never use my title because if I have to throw my title to show that I'm somebody, that then I didn't succeed in life. They should know me for Rachel Ayala.
What do you think was the most important thing you provided to your students?
The most important thing that I provided, and I'll tell you the one that I promoted, was one, that they developed their self-esteem and the respect for their parents. One of the things that I always emphasize to my kids, and every time I talk to them, is to their parents are their best friends. That, yes, you have your friends, but those are the ones who are going to be supporting you in the hard times and in the good times. And the main thing is respect. Respect for those parents because they have earned it. They're the ones that stayed up with you. They're the ones that will never leave you. And that is, you know, that is what I hope that I have instilled and that I have made an impact in this community with kids.
How did your husband impact your daughters?
My husband was a wonderful person because I can tell you, I told you that I was working on my degree and everything. Of course, he was a Dallas Cowboy fan. And on Sundays, he would tell me, go to the library and study, and I will take care of the girls. I am what I am because of him. I had a profession that I put in a lot of hours. He was very understanding. If he would get home, he would start dinner. He was not the type that would not be supportive at all. Let me tell you a little bit of my husband. My husband was a diabetic and, of course, never took care of himself. By the time he passed away, he was a double amputee and he was legally blind. He had open heart surgery. When he was having open heart surgery, we were, my oldest daughter, an English major, was sitting there in the waiting room, and I don't know if you're familiar with Life magazine. Okay. They had an article in the paper that if you had a wish, what would it be? And that they were going to select 3 people to select their wishes. Well, we didn't know that she wrote a letter to Life magazine, and it was something to the effect is that my husband's body is breaking down. He's in a wheelchair now. We grew up with the Dallas Cowboys because they would, on Sunday afternoons. And his dream has always been to go to the game and to go to a camp. But due to his health issues, that is not possible. But if I had a wish, I wish my father could go. Well, they won. She won. And they contacted us, Life magazine. They didn't. They said that we're not going to publish it simply because Dallas Cowboys were making an exception for him. They flew my 3 daughters and their father to Dallas, spent the whole day in training camp. Emmett Smith and Tom Landry and all of them. I have 3 footballs signed with all the Dallas Cowboy players. And they asked me how come I did not go with them. And I told them, do you understand that this was a special bond that my daughters had with their father? And it's something they had to do. So he had a great impact on us. We miss him tremendously. But even his students. I found out one time as assistant superintendent, I had a parent come see me and he says, your picture, is that Mr. Ayala? I said, yes. Your husband? He said, yes. He says, Ms. Ayala, you might not know this because he was director of the Brownsville Boys Club for 17 years. And he said, my dad died and your husband was such a good person. I said, really? Yes, for Christmas, he took us a TV, he took us a Christmas tree, and took each one of us a present. Did my husband ever say anything? No. I have a lot of students that come up to me and tell me the same.
So was your husband an educator as well?
Yes. He was director of the Brownsville Boys Club, and then he was a teacher at Revita High School as well as a football coach. So
how did you guys meet?
Well, do you know that I started teaching at Victoria Heights, and he was also a paraprofessional there, and I was raised up very strict, very, and I remember the first time that he asked me out to go, and I said, I'm not allowed to date. I have to ask permission, and he didn't believe me. So it did, and it was when he asked me to marry him. It wasn't, are we going to get married? It was the old-fashioned type that he had to send a commission, that he had to send his father and other people to speak in his behalf that he was worthy of my marrying him. And then he had to wait an answer for the response. And my husband was not allowed to go to my house. My mother always said that the only man that would cross that door was the one that I was married. So it wasn't until after. It was really, boy, he must have loved me because we spent a lot of time on the phone.
So I forgot to ask, what year was the Dallas Cowboys trip?
I don't remember. I really don't remember. But let me tell you something that it was very unique because our wedding was set, and I was married on December the 21st, I would have been married 50 years this year. And guess what? Out of nowhere, Hurricane Beulah comes. We got married the day after Hurricane Beulah hit. We were going to have our reception at the Civic Center. It was being used as a shelter. We literally got married by candlelights. There was no lights. And the reason we did was because my sister, the maid of honor, was in the service. The best man was in the service. If we didn't get married there, they would be there. And the father said, the church didn't fall down. You can get married. So I used to tell my husband it was an indication of a very stormy marriage, which it wasn't.
So it seems like you and your husband were big influences on your daughters because you're both educators. How do you think that helps them raise their own kids?
It does. Let me share with you about my little one, Rachel. Rachel got a scholarship to go to medical school, and she did her 4 years. She was up in Houston. My husband got very sick, and Mom, I want to go home. I want to spend time with my dad. I said, you know, you're going to lose your scholarship, but I'll send you back. Well, my husband died that year, but she got to spend the year with him. And I wish she had gone back. He said, take care of your mom, which really I'm a very independent. But she's one of the ones that's very successful. She's getting ready to get her PhD. So two of my daughters have a superintendent certificate, and she's getting ready to get her PhD in honor of her father. So he did influence, and they love what they do.
Do you have any other additional comments to make?
The only thing I can say is the best of success for your kids. You're our future. You're what's going to make us successful. And whatever you do it out of your goodness in your heart. I've always told my daughters, if you do something, do it because you want to, not what you can get in return. Because if you're going to do that, then don't do it at all. And you know what my ministry is? My ministry is that I have bereavement. I give rosaries. And I really put my heart into it. My mother used to do it. And I said, Mom, how can you do it? It's so hard. She used to say, that's when people need you the most. And when I give my rosaries, a lot of people say, I want you to give me my rosary. When I die, I said, no, you're going to live a long time. So it'll be a long time before that's going to occur. So that's my ministry right now.
So when you were overseeing Porter High School, was college the goal for the kids? Did you really push higher education?
Of course. And let me share a success story. I had one of my students from Stell Middle School, and she's one of my students that came in. She's one of the ones that came into the United States and became a citizen and everything. And she was valedictorian in high school. And of course, she gets all these opportunities to go to college. And she says, Miss Ayala, yes. She says, I have a particular college that I want to go to. And I said, really? Which is the one that we have in Boston. I want to go to, come on, help me out. Just slipped my mind.
Boston?
Yeah.
Thinking of MIT.
No. Anyway, it's not Stanford. She says, I want to go to Rocio. I can't think right now. Anyway, it'll come to me right now. I'm having a senior moment right now. And so she said, okay. And she says, if you want to go there, I said, I'll get you in there. And she said, really, Ms. Ayala? I said, yes. I was in charge of guidance and counseling department there. I had an excellent young lady. And so we went ahead and contacted the university, and come on, ladies, help me. What's the name of it's an Ivy League college. Yeah, your Ivy League. But anyway, she got accepted, and then she told me uh, after she got accepted, she says, Miss Ayala, I don't think I'm going to go after all. And I said, what do you mean you're not going to go after all? She says, yes, because I'm scared. I'm scared to go. And I told this young lady, you know what? You always say that you admire me. I said, and I have not gotten to where I am by not being a risk taker. I'll tell you what. I'm personally going to take you to your orientation, because I would rather say I went and did not like it than to have a life of regret. I could have gone but didn't want to. She graduated and now is an attorney in New York. Let's see. What is it?
Harvard?
Harvard. She went to Harvard. I want to go to Harvard. So she graduated from Harvard. She came back, she met someone over there and got married. And so I am so proud of her. That's my success story too. I have a lot of success stories, but Rocio is one of the ones that I always remember.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that students face here in the Valley?
You know what the biggest challenge is, and a lot of it has to be because of our Hispanic culture, is that not to let our kids go away, especially the girls, especially in my time. They're very protective of their kids. And that sometimes they miss this opportunity, like Rocio was going to miss it. Okay, so, and it's just, something that we have to overcome. It's not as hard now. Kids are leave, but it was not that case before.
Was it hard for you, even though you went to Kingsville, which isn't too far away?
The only reason it was good, the only reason I went to Kingsville, because my brother was there, and he was going to take care of me. That is why I'm so proud of my sister when she became a commander, because she left from Mississippi and did her training in New Orleans. And my mother really had to convince my father to let her go, because you didn't let her go. My mother's attitude, married women don't go out by themselves. It was just the way it was. How could I not remember Harvard? And Rocio still keeps in contact with me. She'll call me every once in a while. And even though I didn't go into psychology, I have about 24 hours of undergraduate work. Those helped me in my job.
What did you like about psychology?
What I liked about psychology is the understanding of people, being able to work with them. We're all so unique. We all have so many different. I have 3 daughters, and they all have different personalities. And I am amazed sometimes. I raise them the same way, but we all are unique in that aspect.
So, do you think better funding would affect the outcome of test scores or anything like that, or?
The accessibility. It's, better funding and the accessibility for kids to be given the knowledge. For example, here I come from humble beginnings. I didn't know anything about scholarships. I paid for all my schooling. My brothers and sisters were smarter because they got scholarships, and that's how they went. It was not a choice. It was, like I said, it was never are we going to go to college, but where we're going to go to college was a decision we had to make.
What, are you the youngest?
No, I'm the middle child. That's why I'm so assertive.
When the lawsuit happened with the South Texas Border Initiative, what had you seen in schools that you taught at that fit the lawsuit? What they were alleging?
You know what? I didn't see as much of the lawsuit or the talk here. It's more, I don't know, maybe because the funding was there for us, or because our district was smart in utilizing our monies that we had, that we didn't think it was lacking.
So what do you think is a solution?
Again, I'm going to tell you, the communication through proper use of those funds. The proper use of the funds and utilization and how you're going to use it. What's of course, analyze where is your most needed area. How can we be successful? I don't know. I've always said as a teacher, all I needed was a chalkboard and a chalk and a chalkboard, to be able to teach.
Did your kids know that the schools they were attending were at a disadvantage? Were they aware?
No. I'm going to tell you something. That's a good thing. I didn't know I was poor until somebody told me. And I'm going to tell you how that happened. I lived in the southmost area, and I never lacked for anything. My mother made our clothes, we had food, we had everything. So how can you miss what you don't know you don't have? Okay? I was taking a sociology class at Texas Southmost College, and what the project was, we had to go to the county, and they were showing us a map of the city, and then they said, this is the southmost area. That's the poorest section of town. And I said, no, it's not. I live there, and I'm not poor. Because I didn't know I was poor until somebody told me. Because I had the love of my parents. I had clothes. How did I know that there was anything different? So I remember I had one pair of shoes, and every day, my mom was a fantastic seamstress. Every night we would get home, polish our shoes, get our clothes ready for the next day, and I didn't know the difference until somebody told me. I didn't know I was short until somebody told me. I've always, because I've been assertive, somebody told me, oh, you're so short. Really? Really? And then I looked in the mirror next to them. I guess I was. I had never considered myself short until somebody pointed it out.
Do you have any other examples of where people talked about the southmost area?
Yes, if you're from the southmost area, and I get very upset as an area superintendent. I had to fight for that area to make sure that they got the correct funding, that they got what they needed. Because honestly, some of our parents are very humble and don't speak up. So I used to say, they don't have the parents to speak out for them, but they have me. They have me. And I was very blessed that I was assigned to my southmost area. So, and a lot of the kids, another example, I had a young man that invited me. I can tell you what, if a student invited me to go somewhere, I was there. I was at the activities and everything. And a young man invited me to his graduation party. So sometimes I had 4 or 5 things to attend. So he was, he was one of the ones that was either in the top 5 type 10%, and he did not get any monies. And he came from a single parent. So when I saw him, I said, hey, where are you going to go to school? He says, no, Miss Ayala, I don't know if I want to go because I haven't been able to get any monies. I said, I'll tell you what, you go see me Monday, go to my office. And I was in charge of a lot of departments. I was in charge of guidance and counseling. So I sent him to my guidance and counseling, the person in charge, and her name is Pilar Janice, excellent work with the kids. Well, we got him the scholarship. We got him room and board. We got everything. Okay? So about 2 weeks later, there's a knock in my administrative assistant was out, and I said, "Yes, can I help you?" And they go and he says, "Ma'am, can you do the same thing for me that you did for Jose?" We did. Then during the summer, I get another call from a young lady, and she says, "Ma'am, can you help me?" I said, "Sure, what's the problem?" He says, "I'm almost finished with medical school. I've run out of money. This is the problem that we have." We helped her, even though she was not one of my students. She was just a friend of a friend that was referred to me.
Looking back, what was your proudest moment in your career?
The proudest moment in my career, I think, has been the success that I have had in all the different jobs that I've been. The fact that I impacted kids, and the fact that I had an impact on my daughters, and that I wish success for everyone whose life I touched. And that if I was strict, it wasn't because I didn't love them, it's because I wanted them to succeed.